Okay, here we are. Our great friend Dave Petzo is joining us. So, to mimic what your friend Doug Petcash said to you, talking about 10 years ago, the world ended.
Just about did, didn't it? From a financial perspective, we thought it might. It was, and it is amazing to think it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, Lehman Brothers collapsed. That set off the string of events of TARP, TALF, panic. We had bank after bank that was collapsing or near collapse, pulling everybody together. We had Wall Street, and what people don't understand is that many different, if you will, crises come and go,
right,
that we don't really hear much about, because Wall Street, the big banks, the J.P. Morgans, the Goldman Sachs, Citicorp, all these, and Lehman Brothers, right, Morgan Stanley, they all band together to make sure that the system is fine. And they trust each other, and they lend to each other, and so on. That all broke down, and it was really only the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, that came in and started backstopping things like money markets, so that we could trust paper, even for a company like, say, IBM. Nobody would hold their paper even overnight. It was a very, very different time than we faced probably since the Depression.
What was it like for you that day?
When Lehman, well, I'll tell you, it was more like a day after day. Great question, but it was a beating.
Yeah, what was it like for you here?
Yeah, it was phone calls. It was very late nights, day after day, and honestly, a lot of doubt, because in the end, even though you're telling people you've got to hang in there and you know you're right, it's really you're relying, like anybody in any industry that's done it for a long time, anywhere, any professional sports, anything. There are times where honestly, things are different. Something's wrong. There's doubts, and something's really different than anything you've ever seen. But you just trust your old instincts, if you will, your practice drills, what it is. Not just instincts, but you know how to be a professional, and you just say, no, I'm not going to sell here, not at these prices. The answer is no. It's not going to go away. And you really don't know what's going on because you've got nothing historically to point at. But you do know you don't sell into a panic. That's what it felt like. And also, I'll tell you honestly, just kind of banding together, if you're not part of an organization, I can't imagine if you're like an advisor sitting in your kitchen. I know there's not very many of them, but if they're what we call solo practices, I don't know how you really, because you just don't have the people to stand around and talk this through with.
Going back to Merrill Lynch, though, for years, Merrill Lynch, they got the bull on Wall Street, and then all of a sudden, done.
Well, Lehman Brothers,
right,
and Lehman Brothers was the one that really went. Now we lost Bear Stearns early in the year, and somehow we handled that.
Right,
and then but when Lehman went, it was a bigger firm. This meant there was bigger problems, and now all of them were going to go if the Fed didn't step in, and it was. Lehman Brothers, 100 and some years old, and now we argue today whether they should have saved them or not. And that's really the argument now. Should they have just saved Lehman Brothers and saved an awful lot of the potential contagion? I don't know. We don't know. There's also still people out there that say we should have just let them all go. And I don't know what the argument is. We maybe overstepped on all the different programs. Maybe we held them all into place too long. But I don't know what good it would have done to watch all of the Wall Street banks go under. I don't know who would have been our banking system at that point.
Well, from what I understand, and reading the book Too Big to Fail and the movie and such, there was one bank that didn't want any of the money that was forced to take the money, and that was Wells Fargo.
Correct, they say. However, they were forced to take the money, yes.
The feds made them.
J.P. Morgan said they didn't really want the money. So did Goldman Sachs. They said they didn't need the money. And the Fed said, no, everybody takes the money and beef up the balance sheet. That's what Wells Fargo says. I don't know. That's what all those banks said. They don't want anybody to think that they really needed it.
Right, but there was a journalist who was covering the meetings. What would be the benefit for him to embellish?
To embellish that part. I got you. You're right. I don't know. I don't know that there is any.
And then you go to Michael Lewis's book. I still love it to this day, in the movie The Big Short.
Yeah.
Where you had a few select people figure out that the mortgages were fake, phony, and it would just blow up the entire system. And then they bet short on that. How does that work? Because they had to create. They had to create something, and we always hear people saying bet short. What does that mean?
Short betting is you're betting that something's going to go down and
So do you go
in
to
value.
You go to a bookie, or what do you do?
Well, yeah. Yes. Yeah, if you would have shorted Boise State, you were a winner.
Right.
Okay. And in one way, that's exactly what you're doing. If you have a stock like an Apple, I'll take that as an example, and then I'll also tell you about commodities because that's probably as clear. On Apple, you're simply saying most people go buy the stock or they don't buy the stock. But there's actually people out there that say, I really think Apple's going to have bad earnings announcement or whatever it is, and they bet the stock is going to go down. That's buying it short. And in order to do that, you go out and you have to borrow from somebody that owns that stock. It can have a price, and then you go out and sell it. Now, what you have to do at some point is you have to go out and buy that back.
Right.
And so they report that. So a stock that's heavily shorted can often have a lot of buying power built into it. This all started years ago, though. If you think about it in a commodity, let's say I'm an oil producer, and you're an airline, okay? So an oil producer, I know I'm going to be producing oil, and let's say I'm very happy today at $60, $70 a barrel. That makes me profitable. I'd love to lock in prices for the next year at that. I can sell my production. Say I do 1 million barrels a month. I can just simply sell 1 million barrels to you because you're maybe on the other side saying, I want to go ahead and lock in my price. But in this case, you and I are I'm going long because I'm going short. You're going long. You're buying all my production for the next few years. I'm selling it, and I'm willing to take today's price. That's really where it all started,
right.
Where a buyer and a seller join up in a commodities type of way.
Dave Petzo joining us, the Petzo Center. Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. So back to this, the Big Short, and having read the book and the movie and everything else. How did these guys figure this out, that the mortgages were going wrong? We see it now.
Yeah, sure. Right. It was obvious
as
now.
Plain as day.
Yeah.
But back then, it wasn't.
No.
You lived it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, there's a couple things of why, let's say that people like me didn't see it, okay? That's not an excuse. Things like this happen all the time where you get too much leverage into a system, but that system blows up itself, but it doesn't have contagion like this one did. This had contagion. That's what was missed by everybody. These guys they didn't necessarily think that the whole system was going to go down. They were just making a bet on the mortgage industry. What really in my mind is that there was so much AAA paper because the Fed said, hey, Ginnie Mae, Fannie Mae, and you remember Maxine Waters and others
kept throwing
stood
bad
up
mortgages into the good pot, and then they kept bundling it up. And,
correct.
I go back to, and I highly recommend people watch this movie, The Big Short. It's fascinating. If they actually went down to Florida and they saw all these people buying homes with nothing down, and they were going to flip them, and this, that, and the other. You had a stripper owning literally 12 homes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this goes on and on and on. And they didn't have to put any money down. They had to do anything. It was insane. It became insane how easy the lending was. It really all came back to the government because without the government putting AAA ratings on it, the ratings agencies being really vacant of their job, and then further allowing them to slice and dice. So Wall Street, complicit, yes. But it goes all the way back to Maxine Waters and Company, who's simply saying, the government saying, over our dead body, are we going to require people to actually produce documents? You will loan money to people who are very poor and can't get loans. And that's where it really started, was Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and them saying, no, you're going to lend money.
President Bush tried to stop it.
He did.
Yeah, and there was a revolt. So, Dave Petzo, how is it different 10 years later?
Well, if you don't have documentation, if you don't have some money down, you don't get a loan. Period. Nobody is chasing down loans. They have to go through a really lengthy process of proving who you are, all of those things that they didn't have to do before. And now we are seeing very good lending.
You think they're still rigid?
I think they're very rigid, yeah.
Because I go back to this experience when I bought my home 5 years ago, and they actually called this place an hour before I closed. Mm-hmm. Now, it's fairly obvious that I'm employed. It will be fairly obvious when I'm not employed. But, I mean, it was a lot of redundancy, and personally it was a very frustrating process. and yet we had somebody calling, and the people at work had to drop everything
Yep.
to call these slappies back to make sure that I was employed. I'm thinking, okay, there's a little common sense here, but
Yeah. I got a call about a client from a rental place. So he's not buying right now. He's renting, and they still wanted a reference. Isn't that interesting? I mean, it's become much more difficult out there.
Dave Petzo, as the champion of all things Idaho in the Treasure Valley, how crazy is this whole real estate thing right now when we're talking not even buying a home, but rentals? People are going crazy.
It's batty for us right now. This is more like a big city on fire environment, San Francisco, Seattle type of thing, where we this is what it is right now. But we're catching up. We're going to catch up. We still have land, and they're building homes. We will catch up. We have an opportunity to catch up where other cities don't, because they just don't have the property. They don't have land to build on. We do.
But, I mean, how ridiculous is it that the inflation of people buying homes or renting homes, and, well, we need to call you to make sure this guy has reference. He's renting a home.
He's renting an apartment, I think.
Right.
Yeah, crazy. It is. And my daughter's going through that now, too, where you just really have to fill out these. Oh, by the way, an application fee is not refundable.
Right.
If you don't get it, they keep it.
Why in the world would they charge you a fee?
I know. Well, because they can get away with it right now.
Well, that's what it seems, is that they can do it because they can get away with it.
Exactly. And she was sharing with me this as well, that when you go into a apartment, it's $1,100 a month. Well, that seems like a lot to you and I, because prices have changed a lot, but that's the way it is right now. But it's not $1,100. Then you have to pay if you have a pet. You have to pay for this. You pay for that. It adds on literally hundreds a month. So you can put a marquee $1,100 a month, but it's never going to be that. You want a parking place or not? Well, yeah. Well, okay, here. And it goes on.
It's like on your beloved airlines. Now they have this thing called straight economy. You don't carry anything on, and you don't get to pick your seat.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Economy Plus is you get to pick your seat.
Yeah, exactly. For $10, you can actually pick a seat. Yeah.
So this can't be good for the long-range term here in the Treasure Valley or anywhere else. This cannot be good.
It's a symptom of how good it is really what it is. And I'm not saying all things are good. And growth, I want my Boise back, right? Don't you?
I'm not, I'm a Treasure Valley guy.
I want my Treasure Valley back.
Well, you can have Boise.
But it's affecting everywhere throughout the Treasure Valley.
Sure.
I want it back. I want less traffic. I want nicer people. All of those things.
Nicer people are outside of Boise.
And I don't want people coming in here and want to change my politics in my area because they are leaving an area that they've ruined.
I found that people outside of Boise are very nice.
Have you? I have too, actually, as you well know. I love, for example, Caldwell. So
You're hanging out in Caldwell now.
I like hanging out in Caldwell.
Really?
I love Caldwell.
Man of the people, Dave Petzo.
Love Caldwell. I think it's a wonderful area.
All right, coming up, we'll talk to Dave Petzo about Nike and why are people buying Nike stock. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Back with our great friend Dave Petzo, the Petzo Center, Petzo Financial. Petzo Remodeling, perhaps. There's a lot of business going on in the Treasure Valley.
Mm-hmm.
You think we're suffering from wage inflation here? And maybe that's a good thing. I mean, people need to make money, but
they do.
And you sold your house a couple years ago?
Did, yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't as crazy as it is now because people go, hey, I can sell my home and make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then the challenge is finding another place to live.
Yeah, which costs a lot more money.
Right.
Than it did. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so I never understood, but I never in my whole life have understood that, where people talk about, well, back in the 70s, I made so much money on how, when we had the high inflation and things. And then you bought a new house for what? I mean, all the money went back into the new house. I don't understand that. So when I die, I guess my kids get to say, hey, Dad made a lot of money on real estate. It never makes sense to me. But because your point is well taken, we with inflation on housing, it means when we move into another home, it is going to be very expensive unless you downsize. And even then, we're seeing people who that plan was in place, right? But they're moving out of the old house, the one that's 50 years old, right? And it needs remodeled. And by the time, as you were alluding to, I've been going through a never-ending remodeling project. And so, and never-ending, I don't know if I could write enough checks to make it stop. You just cannot believe how expensive it is. And the house was built in 1951. So that's why. It just has a lot. You start taking down walls and, yeah, you know what I'm saying. It's just a lot of stuff. And so you get in these old houses, they want to downsize, and they may have a $100,000 difference to downsize into a new senior living house. It's just not what people would have thought.
Let's go to Nike, a big story in the headlines there. Nike decides to back Colin Kaepernick.
Yep.
They do. The stock tanks. Now all of a sudden the stock is at an all-time high. What the heck happened?
Yeah, I don't know, Kevin. I'm not sure that's a good decision. It takes a long time to have these decisions play out, where people who are more fired up on one side than another of an issue. I don't know why Nike alienated half of the people. The other people right now are really fired up and excited and are out buying shoes just to show support. I get that. But does that sustain itself, or have you alienated people in a long-term, permanent way by making it? Because this is clearly a political statement.
Right.
They won't say that, but it's clearly a political statement. And so that's what they're doing. They're saying they're going all in with minorities is what I basically would say. And I don't know if that I should say that. Hopefully I didn't say something politically incorrect.
Well, Colin Kaepernick and his stance, which is highly controversial, concerning policemen, law enforcement, and the history of the republic.
Right. Yes. And so there's making that statement, and the people that support him, predominantly minorities, and that's what you're ending up with is right now a circumstance where people are saying, support this. And they are, but will they do enough of that? As folks like me say, there's a lot of alternatives out there, and I don't like it when companies make a political stance. I do not like it. I don't like it if they're a pro-me stance. I don't want companies making a stance of a pro-Trump stance. I don't want that. I just want companies to go operate and sell their stuff, make the best shoes they can at the best price possible, and I'll like it or I won't like it. But I don't want a political statement, ever.
More with Dave Petzo next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's get you to work safely and on time.
Jim Ducey.
And Dave Petzo is joining us, the Petzo Center, Petzo Financial. Saturdays, 8 to 10, Money Matters on KIDO Talk Radio. We've talked a little bit about the, Nike and such. Now we have people saying Amazon is too big. It's time to bring in the Sherman Antitrust Act to break up these social media juggernauts. Your thoughts?
I agree. I think it is. And I think that many companies need to become very large, like banks, in order to backstop major economic things. But I think it's time. These companies have gotten so big. They control social media. They control, if you will, public thought in many ways, because they decide what kind of news gets put on. They decide what political slant the news has. They decide who gets their message out and who does not. And I think it's time to go ahead and break them up. And besides, when you look at a company like Amazon, I think it's a classic antitrust case where they make all of their money with some of their services, their web services, and they lose money on the other. So they're killing entire industries by losing money. Selling things because they're supporting it with something else. That's literally exactly what antitrust was designed to do, is not allow companies to get to the point where they can take profits from one area to destroy companies in another area and then take that area over. So it's not. It to me is a very classic case, and I agree with that. These companies are too big and too powerful. It's time to break them up. They are so powerful now that they're just. I don't see how competitors can even begin to get into the space.
I think that's the same for Facebook.
Totally. People talk about it not being the cool thing to do. I don't know what else you do, and nobody else. Well, what about Twitter? What about them? I mean, they don't have anything like the presence that Facebook has, and I think that they have so much data on you and I that breaking them up and allowing more competition in space would be a very helpful thing.
Final thought. There's a report out that the bull market might finally come to an end.
A report out, really?
2020.
Yep.
And then in the cover of Bloomberg Business Week this week, the very long, boring bull market. Your thoughts, your reaction, Dave Petzo.
Isn't it great when we can just sit back and say something's going to happen 2 years from now? Really? That's going to be the end of it.
That's what Terry says.
Yeah, I know. And they all say that. It's astounding. I will tell you, do I have 1 minute? Okay.
The floor is yours.
So I'm in New York last week, and they're talking about how all of these, talking about all of the problems that we have out there and that are coming because things are so good right now. And I'm listening to this, and all of a sudden I realize as they're saying that this is a sugar high. So this is their chief economist saying it's a sugar high. You know what sugar high is? It finally dawned on me. Sugar high is a political comment that says, I don't like Donald Trump so much, even though things are so great, that I'm going to say that the tax cuts are a sugar high. They're not. It's a fundamental shift. And I don't know why a fundamental shift to a decent tax policy, especially on corporations, is not a long-term positive. The corporations that we're hearing now with capital spending, everything is surging, and business confidence. All of these things point to me as I don't know how you can circle a day on the calendar. It's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. I honestly mean that. I don't know how you just sit around and go, 2020, this is what's going to happen. I think it's politics, Kevin. I think it's political statements because there's no way you can predict the future. And you certainly can't say in 2018 that 2020, this is going to happen. It's absurd. Nobody has been able to determine what's going to happen in 6 months, let alone in 24 months.
He's on fire. Dave Petzo. Catch him anytime at the Petzo Center. Online anytime, Facebook and Twitter. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kevin. It's good to see you again.
You're fired up, boy.
You got me all fired up.
All right. Don't mess with that bull market.
Leave my bull alone.
Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Kevin.
7:37, Kevin Miller in the morning. Blessed to be a part of your day. Phone numbers 580-5436. 580-KIDO. Our friend Jeff Manasso joining us from Fox News Radio on KIDO Talk Radio. Talk a little Fox Wheels segment. Good morning, Jeff.
Hey, good morning, Kevin.
How about that Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, it was a heck of a game that I didn't even watch or listen to. Actually, I tried to listen to. I was driving back from Columbus yesterday, and so I barely got it on the radio. I'm glad I didn't invest too much time into it. There's an asterisk on our season and the Vikings season in terms of the tie, but it was quite the game.
Well, it shows you how talented that guy is, though. Here he is injured.
Absolutely.
We don't know the extent, and he goes up against arguably the top team in the NFL and pulls off a tie.
You bet. Yeah. You bet. No doubt about it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the latest in automotives, cars, trucks, SUVs, and everything else. What's going on?
Well, there's a quick recall that we need to talk about. So GM is recalling about a little over 240,000 vehicles in the U.S. and Canada because of a brake caliper problem. The brake caliper pistons in certain vehicles, the company says, contains trapped hydrogen gas, and that can make them feel soft, increasing the risk of a crash. The recall involves 2018 to 2019 GM Terrains, Buick LaCrosse and Regals, Cadillac XTS, Chevy Cruze, Equinox, Volt, Impala, and Bolt vehicles, as well as the 2018 Chevy Malibu. GM says customers will be notified, but they just bring them in and they'll bleed those brakes, those of the hydrogen gas, essentially fixing the problem. There's also a brake issue, or not a brake issue, but an electronic issue that we highlighted in Fox Wheels involving a faulty key fob and a Cadillac XLR, a 2006 Cadillac XLR. A 75-year-old guy in Cleveland has this car, and he got into it a couple weeks ago. His key fob died, and so essentially that means that his car wouldn't start. No windows, no sunroof, no horn. He was locked. He was trapped 13 hours, inside that car. And he was screaming, trying to break the windows. It wasn't until a neighbor saw that his light was on in his garage, the garage door kept going up and down, that he went to seek help, and he was able to free the guy. The XLR has a certain locking mechanism that does shut down if there's no key fob. But what GM says is that he could have just pulled a well-marked manual door release lever located on the floor next to his seat. That would have released him right away. And so people don't know about that, but they should. 72-year-old Texas man and his dog died in 2015 when they got stuck in a Corvette that uses the same type of door mechanism as the Cadillac XLR. So it's very important to get to know your car and know what works and what doesn't work, particularly when a key fob dies.
Sure, and that's a troubling issue for everyone because there are more and more fobs these days.
Yeah.
Jeff Manasso joining us, Fox News Radio. So, are we getting ready for the old end of year, get your greatest deal ever on the car sales as we get ready for the new models?
Deals are everywhere, and I think we talked about this recently. You know, particularly sedans. You can find a steal on those things, and this is the time of year where manufacturers are offering 0% financing in a lot of cases, and deals, well below MSRP. In fact, even below invoice price, which is the deal to be had, particularly on year-end models. So now's the time to buy a car, and particularly towards the end of the month, they'll be begging you to take these things, and so it's definitely a good time.
And the financing is still pretty reasonable.
It is. Well, it all depends on what you're buying, and if there's a vehicle that's in huge demand, you might not get as good of a deal. But there are a lot of vehicles out there that companies and car lots are overloaded with, and they want to get rid of them, and so they're incentivizing those. And so with rebates, with good financing, again, even up to 0% down to 0% financing for these types of vehicles. You just have to look. A really good resource is TrueCar. It's Edmunds.com, and it breaks down what kind of rebates, what kind of incentives these dealers are offering, and you can compare prices with these vehicles. And I've told you this before: you don't ever have to pay anything above invoice price for a car, which is thousands below MSRP. And so this will break down exactly what you're gonna what you have to pay, and even things like floor mats, which is so crazy that they're not standard anymore. You have to pay extra for those floor mats. Any sort of options. There's the MSRP price, and then there's the invoice price. You don't have to pay anything more than invoice price for everything that you roll off of that lot.
Now, here's a question out of left field. A car dealership. Automobile manufacturing, we never really talk about Mitsubishi. Anything going on with Mitsubishi at all?
Who knows? It's one of those companies that has the potential to really sell a lot of vehicles and do well. But they've come out with a couple of redesigned vehicles, but they're not investing as much in the U.S. as they have in recent years, where they had a full lineup of vehicles, but I really don't know much about what Mitsubishi's doing now. They have a couple of vehicles out there, but not much.
Yeah, no, my buddy just purchased a dealership, so I was just wondering about that in Augusta,
Georgia. A Mitsubishi dealership?
Yeah, in Augusta, Georgia. Yeah.
Well, Mitsubishi's a good car, and but they weaned in recent years. Remember, a few years back when they had the Eclipse, they had the Endeavor, they had the Galant, and they had just a nice lineup of vehicles. I'm not seeing that from Mitsubishi these days, and so I'm hoping for your friend that they've got some new options and a brighter future.
Oh, he's one of those sales guys. He can sell anything, Jeff Manasso.
Yeah, well, good.
Jeff, thank you, sir. I wish y'all would have won this weekend, and we look forward to more of your reports.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Jeff Manasso, joining us. Kevin Miller in the morning, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. So now we have Dianne Feinstein, who has released some information, a letter written to her by a woman saying that Judge Kavanaugh molested her, almost killed her. She thought that he was going to inadvertently kill her 36 years ago. Now, 36 years ago, I was 14. I don't know what you were doing 36 years ago, but how ridiculous is this? And then she had this revelation in 2012, but she didn't come forward until now, the last day, the last hour, the last minute, the last second. Isn't this Clarence Thomas all over again? 580-5436, 580-KIDO. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, what will the left do? What they won't stoop to try and derail a conservative Supreme Court justice who donates his time to charity?
Brett Kavanaugh may still win confirmation to the high court, but the margins...
Now, hold on. May still win. What does that mean? Does that mean that if you are a man or a woman, that somebody can say that you did something wrong to them over 36 years ago, And just based on their word, they can destroy an entire person's career. Liberty Linda, good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio with Kevin Miller. Hello, Liberty Linda.
Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
Is this our famous one and only leader, Kevin Miller? You know, it's so exciting to wake up and call into your show and talk about the issues of the day.
Well, we couldn't do it without you. There'd be a lot more of me. So thankfully, I'm glad you called in.
You're absolutely right about it. You know, I called in Friday, and I know I said a little bit of satire, but I don't think it was that too far-fetched. You know, stubbing my toe and having an investigation about it. Look what's going on now about Kavanaugh, what you just said. Dianne Feinstein and accusing him of something that's so ridiculous that happened so long ago. And, you know, let's have an investigation about it. You know, all of us out here watching this circus that's going on. It was a circus when they were questioning him. People trying to break in. And, you know, and Kavanaugh sitting there so calmly. And you could see the intelligence in him. Every time the door opened and somebody started screaming, you know, I even more so think he absolutely is the man chosen for the job. He is the right man. You could see it in his face. And all these things that they're saying, you know, everything has to have an investigation. The American people, I'd say at least 3/4 of them can see right through it.
Well, I agree, but then you have people, well, she's going to be heard and we need to delay. Liberty Linda, and like I said, Harvey Weinstein, Les Moonves, and everybody else, I get it. This guy does not fit the profile. So what we're saying is anyone from anywhere at any time can make an allegation to derail the nomination of a Supreme Court justice.
And that's the whole thing. We know that. We know it's just so that, you know, they can get a Democrat in there. And it's so obvious. Anyway, we sit out here watching our little circus that's going on. We real Americans that understand our country. And, you know, it's just a fiasco. So I'm thankful you're there that we can call in and talk about this. Those people that can see through it all.
Well, like I said, it shows you the libs will not stop at anything.
At anything today. You know, look what they're doing to our president. He's the best president of the century. He's done such magnificent things for our country, turned everything around. You know, for the coal workers, the steel workers. He cares about the little people, every single person here. And yes, we need to build a wall. And we have to have high technology with that wall. Absolutely, like the people are talking about in Arizona. But we have to build a wall. ICE. You know, they're the protectors of our country. How in the world do we want to get rid of ICE? Kevin doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Well, they're trying to deny his success and trying to derail Kavanaugh.
I know. And those people out in our country, I think, you know, probably 3/4 of them have great knowledge, can see through this circus. And anyway, it's just unbelievable to me what they're doing. So, you know, if I say, you know, I stub my toe and they're going to have, you know, an investigation about it, you know, it may be that it's a little satire, but isn't everything satire in our news today?
Liberty Linda, great point. Thank you.
Okay, Kevin, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up next, Kellyanne Conway, special advisor to President Trump, weighs in on the Kavanaugh allegations. You'll hear that next with me, Kevin Miller, only on 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio.
From a few years ago when she recounted this, states that it was an attempted rape. My question to you is, does she consider this an attempted rape?
She does. She clearly considers this an attempted rape. She believes that if it were not for the severe intoxication of Brett Kavanaugh, she would have been raped.
The other person who was in the room, a man by the name of Mark Judge, according to your client, says this didn't happen. He said it's just nuts. This didn't happen.
There we have it. Deborah Katz, attorney for Christine Blasey Ford, on the Today Show, making the allegations against Judge Kavanaugh. Apparently somebody else was in the room and said it didn't happen. Good morning. You're listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio, your home of Win Kevin Miller's Money. What do you have to do? Listen at 6 a.m. and at 8 a.m. to the Kevin Miller Show. When you hear not the cue to call, when you hear the code word, get it, type it in at KIDOTalkRadio.com, or listen at 3 o'clock. The more code words you get, the greater your chance to win up to $5,000. Max in Garden City on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Yes, Liberal Steve, I know you're listening, and I don't want to break your heart, but I have it from an unconfirmed source, referred by another unconfirmed source, that Liberal Steve and Dianne Feinstein had a tryst about 30 years ago. Now, I don't have any more details than that because nobody seems to be able to remember. But Dianne Feinstein, good Lord, even 30 years ago, she would have been old enough for Social Security. I hear she has an autographed picture of Moses in her wallet. Good Lord, what are we going to do? I've never heard such garbage in my life as this unsubstantiated claim from when you're only a couple years younger than Mr. Kavanaugh, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you, Kevin, what were you doing in your junior or senior year of high school? Where were you on Tuesday, March the 3rd of your junior year?
I was probably having a pizza.
Well, there you go. A pizza. Oh, good Lord. You are a criminal. Unless it's a really well-dressed pizza, then we can forgive you. No, I just wanted to call because to what extent can liberal whack job Steve go here? Just how far can he go before his head finally explodes and we have a pizza party to celebrate it? That's all. I'm just here to whine about him and Feinstein. And you know what? Kavanaugh is going to be voted in. He's going to be seated before the midterm election. And when the midterm election comes, people, my prediction, a huge surprise, last-minute red wave. If you're listening to the polls, you're listening to all the polls that lied to you before. How many times do they have to lie to you before you say, I guess they can't be trusted? Kevin, I trust you.
Thank you, Max.
But one thing I don't trust you to do is return my email. Huh?
I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming. Thank you, Max. Traffic and weather together, KIDO Talk Radio. And that's really what it comes down to. Do you believe someone that over 30 years ago is making this allegation against Judge Kavanaugh? Let's hear more.
A man by the name of Mark Judge, your client, says this didn't happen. He said it's just nuts. This didn't happen. Your response?
Well, he's also written 3 books and many, many articles and Twitter posts that have all now been completely scrubbed from the public domain, where he acknowledges that was behavior that from his Georgetown Prep School days, that they routinely engaged in tremendous drinking and really inappropriate.
He said it didn't happen. It didn't happen. He said it didn't happen, and we all don't want to continue to relitigate the past, do we? Boys will be boys. That was the saying for many, many years. Now that's unacceptable. But to bring this up right now, at the last second, at the last minute, this is how afraid they are of Judge Kavanaugh. And by the way, Dianne Feinstein, if you're just tuning in, she's known about this unsubstantiated allegation since July. She chose not to bring it up. She chose not to be a part of it until the last second of the last week to derail a very good man. This is why good people do not get involved in politics. They don't want to be smeared. We saw this with Clarence Thomas. We saw this with Judge Bork. And if you haven't seen those, go back to YouTube, everybody, and check those out today. Very disturbing what the left will do to derail and to try and destroy a good man. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Lars Larson next. Good morning.